giants in the insurance and reinsurance space. So you may wonder, why am I here? Or what can I offer that might be of use? And I struggled with that on the way here as well. You're on the front lines of this. So I thought there were probably a couple of things I could share. Number one, a little bit about why it is that we are not living up to our potential. What is it that's in the way that you might help us get out of the way and make that real difference? Second, a little bit about what are some of the things that we believe will happen next as a result of the work we are seeing emerge. And then third, a little bit about how we're going about the work at our own company, not so much to advertise what it is doing, but rather to emphasize what we think is the right way to approach this opportunity. So those are the three things I'm going to cover. Now, by way of preface, you should understand why we would feel at XL Group that this is such a special opportunity for us to participate in. And here you have to go back to 1986, the year that the company was formed. Back in 1986, if you had a copy of Time magazine, which then, of course, was the record of what was going on in America, it would be physical, of course, and you would have seen a cover that literally said, "America, your insurance has been canceled." What they were referring to was the liability crisis going on at that time, and the fact that major multinational corporations could no longer get liability insurance. And this was literally threatening to grind the economy to a halt. It was one of those moments when you realize the value of insurance by its absence. Our company was literally formed as one of the handful of responses to that crisis. In fact, little Bermuda became the home of a rebirth of the insurance industry. Think of this, from that business model reinvention, that's what it was, a business model reinvention, a fairly simple idea. Today, Bermuda will write about $160 billion in annual premiums from that little idea just more than 30 years ago. So we think we know something about helping insurance pass the times when it is stuck. And it is stuck today. So the first of those three things I said I'd talk about is this idea of losing relevance. And what are some of the blocks we see to why we can't regain our ability to do what we do? I'm going to divide it into three parts. First, what is the fundamental purpose of insurance? Number two, what are the economic indicators of its failing its purpose? And number three, what do I think are the core reasons that is happening? First, as to purpose, and I say this with great affection. I love the industry I work in. And I think any presentation made in our space that's going to capture my attention will at least understand why we do what we do. What is the difference we make in the world? Interestingly, we're an extension of society. Societies are formed to protect one another. First and foremost, we are seeking the safety of the community and of the group, and the benefits of sharing the risks we face together. That's at the root of why humans seek to band together. We are an extension of that is focused entirely on what happens when things go wrong. We are seeing that difference we make in society writ very large right now. We have these three hurricanes that tore up the Caribbean, Florida, Texas. Really quite extraordinary sequence of events. On the 500,000 tracks we studied, this is one of handfuls of potential events. They call it, in the industry, we're already using acronyms. We call it HIM, right? Harvey, Irma, Maria. More than $100 billion will flow out of the insurance industry and into those communities to rebuild them. That is happening right now. And I guarantee you it is happening faster and with greater clarity and with more specific purpose than any of the government programs that will ensue. That, writ large, is the purpose of what we do. We can bring that closer to home. The heinous events that occurred yesterday will be experiencing insurance as part of the recovery as well. from the families covered by life insurance to the counseling we provided for the tortured memories that will come forth. And already the industry is thinking, what more can we do to help live events be safer spaces for joy? That conversation has already started because that is what this industry does. And jerks like that are not going to be defeated. And I'm proud you're all here and being brave and forgetting about it. We just got to pray for the people who are affected. But that's our industry. It's that important. So that's the purpose. That's what we're trying to do. What are my indications that we're not doing all we can? Now, my dad is a little old on one of these, forgive me, but I've never bothered to look again because I know it's accelerating. So in the decade from 01 to 11 in this century, so 2001 to 2011, economic growth over that decade, on average per year, globally, was about 2.7%. So that includes the Great Recession. In net for the decade, we grew per annum about 2.7%. At the start of that decade, globally, property and casualty insurance, the one I work in, property and casualty insurance was 3.4% of global economic activity. By the end of that decade, it was 2.9% of global economic activity. Historically, we have tracked wealth creation, which makes sense, right? We stand behind it to rebuild it. How could the world be growing and we be declining? Simple. We're not making the difference we can. In fact, the one feature that you would know most intimately that led to the greatest acceleration in that difference was the growing relevance of the technology sector over the same period of time, and the fact that insurers have been totally frustrated at how we could create solutions that back technology. Said in a simple way, we are great at physical things, we are poor so far at ideas. Great at atoms, lousy at bits. We can't get our head around it. We can't figure out how to protect ideas like we can easily restore your car, your house, your business. This is a huge failing when so much of the wealth being created is surrounded in these ideas. This is an opportunity, but today a manifestation of challenge. And again, I can make it even more local rather than global, not just a big idea, a little one. And that is when you see these catastrophes, pay attention to a number. The difference between the economic loss and the insured loss. That gap is us exposed as an industry, not making the difference we can. And alarmingly and true around the world, that gap visits the poorest the most. Unacceptable. When a typhoon rages ashore in the Philippines, you can predict right now 1% of the economic loss will be insured. When there's an earthquake in China, 1% of the economic loss will be insured. In fact, on average around the world, it's less than 20%. But if you think this is just some emerging world problem, let me make it clear that it's not. Superstorm Sandy, it's not that hard to say, but Superstorm Sandy, when it raged ashore up in New York, it managed to hit spot on the nose the most insured square mile on the planet. Only half of the economic loss was insured. That's us not providing the resilience to billions of people that we know how to do. It should take you back, and it should also be a sign of the opportunity that lay ahead. So if the first thing I want to say about this idea of the problem is what's the purpose, and if the second thing I want to say is what are some of the economic manifestations that we're not getting it done, the third thing, and perhaps the critical thing for this audience, is what do I view as the barriers? What are the things that are preventing us from doing more? And I think there are three ideas in reverse order of importance. Number one, cost. Number two, insight. And number three, trust. Those are the big ideas. Now, I remember reading somewhere that I referenced Bezos before, I'll reference him again, that he observed that frugality is often the source of innovation and life constraints. Because when you're in a tight box, innovation is the only way out. I think that's a good thought. So let's talk about cost. I can do this in two ways. One, just by the numbers, and two, just by psychology. The numbers are obvious. We sell a product that is, on average, manifests in what the consumer wanted about 62 cents out of every dollar. Think about that. The customer wanted a product that would respond to their misfortune. And of the dollar we take in, somewhere around 60 cents, a little more, actually goes to pay those claims. And even in there's some friction costs to the actual experience of the client. Those other 38, 35, 40 cents, they're going to distribution, sales, the friction costs of issuing policies, the record keeping, all that stuff. In other words, not the stuff the client is after. So, by an economic illustration, there's a clear opportunity, and I know many of the things y'all are working on are around how do we solve some of these friction costs and get them out of the system at whatever point they exist. Sure. But as I said, I think there's a psychological element as well. There will always be downward pressure on the cost of insurance. Always, always, always. From two psychological effects. Number one, you don't want to buy it. But hands up, last time you got your homeowner's policy, who danced? Yeah. When you brought home the big screen, you probably did a little happy dance, right? This isn't a product people want to buy. They don't want to have to use it. And they're not sure that when they do need to use it, it'll work the way it was intended. They've all heard a horror story here that frankly, and I'll get to this in trust, a lot of them look at that contract and say, it's just like Vegas. I'm playing against the house. So cost is you're not when you're buying something you don't want, you're going to be very focused on cost. And yet here you're buying a product where so little of it, even by statistics across the whole industry, will come back to the client. Second thing, insight. To overcome part of the cost dynamic is that we're creating more and more efficient and effective and properly priced pools of risk. But in order to do that, we have to have more and more insight into the actual nature of risk, and then even more insight about how the individual client is likely to experience that risk. Not only is each participant in the room pool distinct from one another, but the entire risk is changing all the time. This is one of the great challenges for the industry. You know, over time, we develop our policies by looking firmly backward at what happened in the past, trying to create a pool around risks. Well, if we're staring backwards and the world is moving this fast forwards, guess what happens? We produce products that don't really match the current state of risk, and that the client knows by their own experience isn't as well designed as it could be. This again puts downward pressure on what people will pay because they presume there's a mismatch. And it means we can't make the product ever better to match that mutating risk and the client's expectation. Insight, insight, insight. How do we get better at this? There's a huge amount of exciting work going on in sensors and all. It's a magical time. But that's where it needs to go. What is the insight we have on the risk and how we get the job done? And then third, trust. I told you I was saving the most important for last. Everything I just mentioned is about distrust. Distrust that the product will work. Distrust that I'm getting a fair return for my dollar of premium. In essence, the entire regulatory system, which actually slows down innovation enormously in our sector, the entire regulatory system exists because when you're selling a promise to be paid into the future in unpredictable circumstances, there's been a lot of abuse of the trust of the person who's already paid for that collective right. There's an inherent trust issue. Let me give you an example of change that's coming in the industry because of insight-driven trust, and then use your imagination to where you might take this. Historically, insurers back all risks with their own capital. That's why, of course, the regulator was so interested in how much capital they have. This made it fairly inefficient, and it led to some of the distrust because a claimant, I always think that's a bad phrase, right? A person who has an event that needs the use of the product they bought is called a claimant because they're laying claim to some of the money that the insurance company has collected from them and others. It's almost inherently an adversarial observation, isn't it? And it gets in the way of trust because there's not certainty on the part of the claimant that that insurer is really honestly going to treat that claim fairly. However, when we get to new capital coming into the industry, as it has been excitingly, we see some different things happening. Number one, we see increased insight creating modeling that allows new forms of capital to trust participation in the industry. That's a big deal. So it doesn't just have to be capital put into an existing company. It can be put directly at the back of risk. Any of you inventing a new business model know that could be incredibly valuable to have just-in-time capital from a provider that is not just another insurer. And at the same time, they use parametric triggers to establish when payment will be made and collateralized features so that it's very clear, or at least we hope, very clear what happens next. This creates trust in the system where there would usually be distrust, wipes out whole categories of activity in the current insurance product. Incredibly exciting. We're watching it right now, by the way. This has been going on for the last couple of decades, accelerating in the last decade in the catastrophe insurance space. Much of the claims in these recent events will be paid by non-traditional capital through parametric triggers. Incredibly exciting. It's a big test for the sector right now. But where that leads your mind and imagination in terms of business models should be unlimited, because it gets rid of a lot of the reasons for distrust in the existing system. Those are the three big barriers, the things we have to overcome to really have outstanding change. How do we get after the cost structures? How do we get after insight? And how do we get after trust? So if we say that's the precondition, that's the big blockers, and that's the big problem, what are some of the things we think happens next? I'm going to cite 5 things. 3 of them are very positive. 2 of them are potentially risky. Overcoming any of them is a good idea. So 5 things. Number 1, risk pools are going to change and become more precise to the risk they serve. I'll give a real simple example. Today, in property insurance, we tend to insure a lot of similar factors. Okay? Now, usually there'll be at least one specialized process within the factory that we don't cover in the general policy, and that's the boiler or the energy source in the room, if it is there. That's been specialized for a long time. But everything else in there, we're just kind of insuring as a whole. Well, those of you in AI and all these other exciting things, you know that through sensors, the machines within that factory can be talking to each other overnight and learning to do their job better. That's a real interesting thing. It's happening already. Forklifts talking to each other and not having drivers. All this stuff gets very exciting. It's all wonderful, but why then wouldn't you start pooling those like machines instead of just blankly the factory? Because you pull it out into its own risk pool and get much more efficient. This gets incredibly exciting because if the sub-processes reach in their own risk pools, which are much more logical risk pools, the kind of wrapper that you would do for the plant isn't that much left over. Do they have good fire systems and are they in quake zones and that kind of stuff? Stuff we have a lot of experience with. That gets pretty exciting. And some of the technologies people are working on right here, and in fact that we've invested in, that's part of what we're seeking to do, see if we can't change risk pools to be more efficient, more matched to the risks the client experiences. The second one, after risk pools, is then you can get to really interesting and dynamic pricing. And now we're back to attacking that cost problem. One of the things everybody hates about insurance is if you have a car you don't use very much, you still pay for it on an annual basis. You might get a break in terms of hours driven, but it's completely imprecise in the actual experience of risk of that asset of yours. or of you as a driver. But we could get to dynamic pricing if sensors are working correctly, and I know a lot of you are working on this. This gets incredibly exciting, not only in the sense that we can price more precisely and therefore more acceptably to the client, but also we can use pricing to send risk signals to the user so they may know this isn't a good time to do whatever it was they were thinking of doing. Driving in a snowstorm should not cost the same as driving on dry pavement. Those are two different risks, to put it in the simplest way. How do we create products that can dynamically analyze and respond and precisely price to the risk being experienced? We know that would be more exciting for the client, for the user of these products. The third thing we think that will change is we'll finally attack underinsurance in a big way. And I'll just use one example, but boy, there's so many. I talked about the economic loss problem we have. But flood is the one that comes mainly to mind. You know, the fact is, especially if you are in an era where the climate is changing, we simply don't have products widely available that really get after how flood affects businesses and people. The most startling part of the Harvey storm, for example, will be the 50 inches of rain that got dumped on Houston. That's the one we're all going to learn from. But we have so much more to do, and that is the main source of wild underinsurance around the world, is flood. And there's political problems. There are ineffectual government programs that literally make the problem worse rather than better. There's a lot of challenges to get honest price signals into the market about the real cost of these risks. But solving flood would do more for humanity than anything I can imagine. And the second is insurance that is really narrow and cheap, that creates some levels of resilience among the less well-off amongst us. That's the second space that we're right on the edge of some huge breakthroughs, and one that I think will do as much for advancing the opportunity for more people than anything I can think of, because resilience is what cripples burgeoning economic areas. So I think we'll get after underinsurance and be a better world for it. But as I said, if those are the three exciting ones, risk pools are going to change, prices are going to change, and we can get after underinsurance in a big way. I said there were two that were going to be tough. One is we've got to sort out the future liability theories. How to blame who is going to change. I used that example of the machines. Should it be the builder of the machine, the software manufacturer, the monitor, the owner? Who's to blame when something goes wrong? If we don't start sorting that out, a lot of the things you're working on will never get to market. Because people won't buy products if they don't know what will happen and to whom when something goes wrong. And that's what liability theory is all about. And it takes forever for it to evolve in the courts. We've got to demand our legislatures, demand that our governments think forward about this, not after the fact. Or we're going to slow down the rate of human progress. And then finally, the obvious one, these technologies not only enable us to be more precise in risk pooling, precise in pricing, but they're creating their own new risks that we're having trouble getting our heads around. Whether it's cyber, hacking, and all the rest, whether it is privacy, all of these are new risk categories that we are barely scratching the surface of. And again, if we don't start solving these, we will slow down the rate of human progress, because that's what happens when insurance isn't available. We have a lot of work to do. So those are the big 5 areas we see as focal areas for our work. That doesn't, however, the last thing I'll say, and it's brief, that doesn't, however, shape how we approach the marketplace. At our company, we are aware of two ideas. Number one, when big business model breakthroughs happen, you don't know what idea will set that in motion. So we don't just look for companies to invest in through Excel Innovate and Tom and his team. We're not just looking at people, at things that squarely address what we already do, because we think the breakthrough can come from anywhere with a good idea in the large spaces I just described. Second, we're always looking for partnership. I can do this as an intelligence test. If someone in this room is the single smartest person on cyber and the planet, if you came to work for our company, I would assume you're an idiot. Somewhere else, you're more valuable than at Excel. So we know it would be about partnering. how your expertise and ours blend together to create these breakthroughs. And then finally, we believe absolutely that it is in the end has to be business model revolution that takes all of these challenges in line and redevelops the value chain around them to deepen trust, lower costs, and create mindset. And that's what we're looking to invest in, is people who have pieces of that puzzle and hope we'll get to go on the ride with them to reinvent this sector. I hope this has been a little bit useful about a different piece of the perspective, both as an investor in and a participant in the sector you're trying to change. I look forward to your success. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good day.